Now taking up active transport. Active transport is against the concentration gradient. That means it is like uphill journey which will require expenditure of energy. Now in this case, let us take an example. So here again we have the enterocyte, and in this enterocyte this is the luminal surface from where the absorption. Now taking up active transport. Now active transport is against the concentration gradient. That means it is like uphill journey which will require expenditure of energy. Now in this case, let us take an example. So here again we have the enterocyte, and in this enterocyte this is the luminal surface from where the absorption will begin. So here we can mention like there are number of channels for the absorption of sodium, and sodium from high concentration will be moving into the enterocyte without expenditure of energy. So this first part is certainly facilitated diffusion. Now when sodium is moving through this sodium transporter, along with this it allows movement of one molecule of glucose. So one glucose molecule can move along with one sodium ion. Same way sodium also allows the movement of galactose, also allows the movement of amino acids. So here we are taking just one example in the beginning. So let us first take that sodium and glucose, they are moving together into the enterocyte. So once they reach into the cell, here sodium and glucose. Now what happens is that glucose will be moving out of the cell via another transporter, and this transporter will allow the movement of glucose outside into the bloodstream. So from here it is going to move out to blood, and this transporter here is glut, which we have studied in case of biomolecules, that is the glucose transporters. And these glucose transporters also allow the movement of galactose as well. Now what happens to this sodium? Now inside the cell, the concentration is always more of potassium ions and not of sodium ions. So this sodium ion which has come into the cell has to be transported out, and this sodium has to be transported out of the cell. So there are 3 Na which are going to be pumped out of the cell, and they are going to be replaced by importing 2 potassium. And at this stage there is going to be expenditure of energy. So here one ATP molecule is hydrolyzed to ADP, and that energy is utilized to pump 3 Na out and to import 2 K, that is 2 potassium ions inside. So at this step the process becomes active, although the first step was very much passive. But since overall process is requiring energy, it is considered a part of active transport. So in this case glucose absorption we can mention is by sodium dependent co-transport. So here this type of process that is taking place is sodium dependent co-transport, because 2 substances are being transported together, and that is depending on the concentration of Na. And what all substances are absorbed in this manner? Sodium dependent co-transport, that is as we have seen for glucose, then also galactose, and amino acids. So all three of these are going to be absorbed in the same manner. And this entire process is also called secondary active transport, or we can simply remember sodium dependent co-transport. And since here we are talking about water soluble substances, so at each stage we can see there are different carriers. Now this is a sodium dependent co-transporter. Here we have seen glucose transporter, and here there is another transporter which can also be called an antiporter, because it is also transporting two substances, that is sodium ions and potassium ions, but in opposite directions. Now absorption is over. So here we have seen that the end products of carbohydrate, proteins, their end products are absorbed into the bloodstream, and the end product of lipid digestion is absorbed into the lacteals, that is into the lymphatic circulation. Now moving on to the next part, that is assimilation. Now assimilation is the absorbed nutrient from the food, they will be reaching the cells, and in the cells they will be utilized for growth, repair, energy. For example, we know glucose is used in respiration to provide the energy. Amino acids are used to build new proteins, and major organ where assimilation occurs is liver, where excess glucose is going to be converted to glycogen. Amino acids are used to convert them to proteins which are required in the body. There is, after excess amino acid, they will be deaminated and urea is going to be formed, which is then removed from the body through urine. And as far as energy is concerned, we can see that when a carbohydrate is burnt in a bomb calorimeter, that means it's an apparatus where energy is not going to be lost. Whatever energy is produced, all that we can record it. So in that case, 1 gram of carbohydrate, when it is burnt in the bomb calorimeter, it is going to yield 4.1 kilocalories of energy. And here kilocalories is the term that we use. However, the dietitians, they use the term calorie, but a dietitian's calorie is starting, or it is written with a capital C, which actually is denoting kilocalorie. And how do we define this kilocalorie? It is the amount of heat required to raise the temperature of a kilogram of water by 1 degree Celsius. Now here we have the physiologic value. Physiologic value is the value that we get in our body, because certainly some of this energy will be losing as heat. So every energy that is produced will not be usable. So the usable form of energy only we are counting, and that's why the physiologic value is going to be certainly lesser than the gross value. So the physiologic value is 4 in case of carbohydrates. Same way we can read for proteins, 5.65 kilocalorie per gram, while the physiologic value is just 4. And for fats it is the maximum, that is 9.45, while the physiologic value is 9. Now in this you may get a question like, a person consumes, let us say, 10 gram of albumin, 2 grams of butter. So what is the total energy value that he will be getting? Now albumin, we should remember, is a protein. So that means 10 gram of protein if the person is taking, so we'll have to multiply 10 by 4. So 10 times 4 would be 40 kilocalories that person will achieve by consuming 10 gram of albumin. So in such questions we have to use the physiologic value, because we are talking about the body. Same way, if 2 grams of butter, so that means 2 times 9, that would be 18 kilocalories of energy that person would be getting. So likewise we can solve the questions, and if there is any food product which we cannot digest at all, like in the food there is mention of cellulose or the roughage, lignin, these are undigestible fibers, and since these are not digested, they will not be absorbed and assimilated. The value will remain 0. Now moving on to the next part, that is whatever remains undigested passes on to the large intestine. So what does the large intestine do? Undigested material such as cellulose along with other unabsorbed substances, they will be acted over by bacteria which are inhabiting our cecum and colon, and they will be fermenting all those undigested products. And once the food passes into the large intestine, peristalsis is still occurring, but it has become quite slow. And as the food is passing slowly, some of the water which is left out, maximum water once again gets absorbed in the small intestine itself, but whatever is left out, that water also gets absorbed. Some of the sodium ions and other monovalent ions, they will be absorbed. And the action of the bacteria, it certainly produces the gases, but at the same time these bacteria are also producing vitamins K and also some of the vitamins from the B group, which can be absorbed and used by us. That's why we are naming these bacteria as symbiotic, because we are providing them with the raw material and in turn we are benefited by these vitamins. And the undigested waste, they finally form the feces. And these feces, they are eliminated, and the process of elimination is called defecation. And these feces, they are constituted by undigested waste, which will be containing the bile pigments, some of the dead cells and bacteria are there. And the color of the feces is due to the bile pigments. If you remember the bilirubin that we had discussed, that in the intestine by the bacterial action gets converted into stercobilin, and it is this stercobilin which gives the color to the feces. And the odor is due to indole, scatole, which are formed during the hydrolysis of tryptophan, which is one of the amino acid, and that tryptophan, when it is finally broken down, there is formation of some of these products like indole and scatole. So this was about the process of digestion. Now finally moving on to some of the disorders. Now there are number of disorders, some of them we have already discussed, like here we have a disorder mentioned, gastroenteritis. Now wherever we have a term ending with itis, we know that it is inflammation. So it is inflammation of the intestinal tract, and it could be because of an infection. And that infection could be bacterial, viral or helminths. Then another one, jaundice, where there is yellowing of the skin, nails, eyes, and that is due to excess bile pigments being produced. So in case the bile pigments are not easily removed from the body, or maybe there is obstruction in the bile duct and they are accumulating in the body, that will result in jaundice. Then of course diarrhea, which we know, loose motions, there is increased speed of the bowel movements, too much liquidity in the fecal discharge, and this again is usually by an infection, bacterial infection, food spoilage by bacteria, and such food when ingested will lead to diarrhea. And if it is not controlled, it can lead to acute dehydration. Lot of water will be lost from the body. Then of course opposite to diarrhea is constipation. Now constipation is when the bowel movements become very irregular and the chyme is passing too slowly. So as a result, there is too much of time available in the intestine. So as a result, all the water gets absorbed, the feces become very hard and dry, and it becomes difficult for egestion. And it can be controlled if the person takes a diet which is rich in fiber. And fiber, we know, that is roughage, cellulose which is there, because cellulose has the ability to bind with water. And as a result, the bowel movements become easier. And if the person is already suffering from constipation, the relief can be brought about by giving laxatives or purgatives. If you remember, in biomolecules we have discussed the seed husk of isabgol. That is again a mucopolysaccharide. It is not digested, but it retains water in the intestine. Similarly, some divalent ions can be given, like magnesium ions. Now divalent ions are very slowly absorbed, and quite a lot of amount of it remains unabsorbed. So if the ions are not absorbed, they are present in high concentration in the lumen of these large intestine. So what would happen? There is a concentration gradient, because of which water by osmosis will move out of the enterocyte and come into the lumen. So in the lumen there will be sufficient water for the bowels to move. Then coming to vomiting, it is the contents of the stomach are purged out. Now that again is if there is some kind of irritant present, like even after alcoholic drinks also people have vomiting because the stomach lining gets irritated. And once it is irritated, that sends a nerve impulse to the vomiting center, which is located in the hind part of the brain, that is the medulla oblongata. And as a result, there is reverse peristalsis. Reverse peristalsis occurs where the contents of the stomach will be moving through the esophagus and finally will be coming out to the mouth. And last but not the least, of course, indigestion. Now, indigestion is feeling of fullness, and because the food has not been properly digested. And this can be due to inadequate enzyme secretion, that is in the stomach, proper enzyme secretion is not there, too much of anxiety, because anxiety also results in disturbance of the alimentary canal, food poisoning, overeating, and even excess of spicy food. All that can result in indigestion. Other than these disorders, there are some more disorders related to malnutrition, and those are called the protein energy malnutrition disease or the PEM disease. So next we would be discussing the PEM diseases. Now taking up a disorder related to malnutrition, and these malnutrition disorders are collectively called PEM diseases, where PEM stands for protein energy malnutrition. Now if you remember, protein is the bodybuilding food and the energy giving foods are carbohydrates and the lipids, that is fats. So there is malnutrition regarding proteins and energy giving foods. Now out of this there are two diseases. One is kwashiorkor. Now kwashiorkor comes from a Swahili word, that is from African language, which means the neglected child. And in this case, as we can see here, there are wasted muscles, thin limbs, retarded growth of the body as well as the brain, swelling, that is edema in the legs due to retention of water, reddish hair, pot belly, and there would be weakened immunity. Now such a child is certainly getting some of the energy giving foods, that means there would be still subcutaneous fat, but the diet is lacking in proteins. And this kind of disorder is observed in children of 1 to 5 years of age. So here we can mention that this disorder can be seen in children in the age group of 1 to 5 years. Then there is another disorder, that is marasmus. Now in case of marasmus, there is no subcutaneous fat, as we can see. Emaciated muscles, all the ribs are easily visible, the limbs are so thin, highly weakened immunity would be there, and this kind of disorder is seen in children within 1 year of age. So it is a child belonging within 1 year, and there would be high mortality rate. Marasmus is one major reason for infant mortality rate, and in case the child is having marasmus, as they cross 1 year of age, then there would be marasmus as well as kwashiorkor. So that's why then it is called marasmic kwashiorkor. And it happens to those children who have been weaned from mother's milk very early. Mother's milk has been replaced by a diet which is very poor in the protein and the energy giving foods, and that is why such a condition occurs. Now after these disorders, we move to one last concept in this chapter, that is regarding vitamins. Now vitamins, they were discovered by Casimir Funk, and the vitamin that he discovered, they were amines, and he found out that these are very important for the body, and that's why the name arose, vital amines, which was then clubbed as vitamins. And these are organic compounds, very essential for normal growth and body functions, and these cannot be synthesized in our body. Now these vitamins, they are required in very, very small quantities, and they have number of diverse functions in the body. Like for example, vitamin B2. Now B2 is riboflavin. It is converted in the body to FAD, flavin adenine dinucleotide, which is a coenzyme used in many of the metabolic processes. And for humans, nearly there are 13 vitamins which are required in the diet, and their daily requirement ranges from 0.01 to 100 milligrams per day. Now these vitamins, they are classified on the basis of their solubility. Some of them are water soluble and some of them are fat soluble. Now the water soluble vitamins are the entire B complex, which is having number of vitamin B's and C. So first of all, we begin with water soluble vitamin, and the first one, that is B1, thiamine. Now the sources, as we can see, pork, legumes, peanuts, whole grains. Now this is important because in whole grains, the upper layer is having B1, and if these whole grains are polished, then we are losing B1 from it. Now their functions, it is coenzyme used in removing carbon dioxide from organic compounds, that means in decarboxylation reactions. The deficiency of B1 causes beriberi, a disease where there is tingling, poor coordination, reduced heart function, there would be neuritis, that means there is inflammation in the nerve cells, and ultimately resulting in paralysis. Now next one, that is B2, riboflavin. It is found in dairy products, meats, enriched grains, vegetables. Functions, component of coenzyme FAD and FMN. And if you remember from the topic that we have studied in biomolecules, we have studied the structure of FAD and FMN, which are dinucleotides, FMN being of course mononucleotide, and in this the ribose sugar is bonding with riboflavin. So we know the structure as well, and deficiency is leading to skin lesions, and there would be cracking at the corners of the mouth. Now next one, that is B3 or niacin. It is also called nicotinamide, and it is present in nuts, meats, grains. It is component of another very important coenzyme which is important in cellular respiration, and NADP, that is in photosynthesis. So NAD, the structure, again we have studied it, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide, and it is with one more phosphate to it. Now the deficiency causes skin and gastrointestinal lesions, delusions, confusion, and the name of this disorder, which is due to B3 deficiency, is pellagra. And this pellagra is called a 3D disease because all the symptoms of pellagra start with a D, the letter D, that is dermatitis, inflammation in the skin, there is dementia, that is mental derangement, and diarrhea, and that we can see gastrointestinal problems would be there. Now moving on to the next one, that is B5 or pantothenic acid. Now this one is present in meats, dairy products, whole grains, fruits, vegetables. It is component of coenzyme A. Coenzyme A again is one important coenzyme of the process of cellular respiration. When you will study about the link reaction where pyruvic acid is converted to acetyl coenzyme A, and then it is moving on to the steps of Krebs cycle. So there in that link reaction we will come across coenzyme A. And deficiency leads to fatigue, numbness, tingling of hands and feet, these kinds of disorders. Now next one, that is B6 or pyridoxine, present in meats, vegetables, whole grains. This is again coenzyme used in the amino acid metabolism. Deficiency leads to irritability, convulsions, muscular twitching, anemia. Because during the process of hemoglobin, there also B6 has a role in the process of the entire metabolism, as it is an important coenzyme. Now the next one, B7 or biotin. It is found in legumes, vegetables, meats, and functions as coenzyme in synthesis of fat, glycogen and amino acids. And deficiency leads to scaly skin, inflammation, neuromuscular disorders, and of course very similar to the disorders we had seen with B3. Then next one, B9 or folic acid. Now the word folic acid comes from folia, that is leaf, because it is found in all green leafy vegetables and also in whole grains and fruits. It is again an important coenzyme in the nucleic acid. It is a coenzyme in nucleic acid and amino acid metabolism, and its deficiency leads to anemia and also birth defects. So if the mother during pregnancy is not getting sufficient B9, there would be birth defects in the fetus. And the anemia which is resulting due to B9 deficiency, it is called megaloblastic anemia, because large immature RBCs are going to be released into the bloodstream. So megalo means large and blast is immature. So it is megaloblastic anemia. Now moving on to the next one, that is B12, which is called cyanocobalamin or simply cobalamin, because it is having cobalt in it. And this is one vitamin which is present only in the animal source. It is not found in any plant food except spirulina, and spirulina is blue-green algae. Otherwise it is present in meats, eggs, dairy products, and dairy products again are part of animal food. And this is a very, very important vitamin, so it is required for the production of nucleic acid and of course during the process of red blood cells. Its deficiency leads to anemia, numbness, loss of balance, and here this anemia is called pernicious anemia. And sometimes it may not be just B12 deficiency in the diet, but it might be that the stomach lining is not producing Cassell's intrinsic factor. So if you remember from this topic itself that we have discussed that the parietal cells in the stomach, they secrete Cassell's intrinsic factor which binds with B12, and then only B12 can be absorbed. And this B12 is also synthesized by our symbiotic bacteria which are living in the cecum and the colon. So some amount of B12 will be getting as a product from those bacteria. Now moving on to next one, that is vitamin C or ascorbic acid. This is present in all the citrus fruits and also in broccoli, tomatoes, and it is very important in the process of collagen synthesis, and it's an important antioxidant. That means it removes free oxygen radical. And in collagen synthesis, if you remember, there is an enzyme that is prolyl hydroxylase. That means which is required for the formation of hydroxyproline. And for that enzyme, ascorbic acid is the coenzyme. And its deficiency leads to scurvy, where there is loosening of the teeth, there will be bleeding from the gums, and it is important for immunity as well. So if there is deficiency of vitamin C, there will be delayed wound healing. So these were the water soluble vitamins. Now we take on the fat soluble vitamins. Now fat soluble vitamins are 4 of them, that is A, D, E and K. So starting with A, also called retinol, and it is present in dark green and orange vegetables, like if we see carrots, ripe pumpkin, ripe papaya, and also in dairy products. It is component of our visual pigments, rhodopsin, which is in the rods of the eyes, and it also maintains the epithelial tissue because it prevents excessive keratin formation. and deficiency leads to blindness, that is night blindness basically. But if there is extreme deficiency, there would be entire blindness, because even the cones will not be able to function. And there are skin disorders because there will be excess keratinization and impaired immunity. Then moving on to next one, that is vitamin D or calciferol. And this is also called sunshine vitamin, because this is one vitamin, the only one which we can synthesize in our body, but that too when there is sunlight falling on it. So when sunlight falls on the skin, the cholesterol gets converted to vitamin D. So that's why it is also called cholecalciferol. And otherwise, small amount of it is found in dairy products and egg yolk. Now functions, it aids in the absorption of calcium and phosphorus. So whatever calcium we are taking in the diet won't be absorbed if there is no vitamin D available. Its deficiency causes rickets, that is bone deformities in children, and osteomalacia, that is in adults. Osteomalacia where the bones are becoming weak and they will easily get fractured. Next one, E or tocopherol. The sources are vegetable oils, nuts, seeds. So in unsaturated fats there is quite abundance of vitamin E, and it is a very important antioxidant. That means again it removes free oxygen radical, the function which we had studied with vitamin C as well, and it helps to prevent the damage to the cell membranes, because if there is too many free oxygen radicals are being formed, they will destroy the cell membrane also. So it makes the cell membrane stable, and that can happen with the RBCs also. Even hemolysis of RBCs can occur if there is deficiency of vitamin E, and otherwise it can also lead to nervous system degeneration. And last one, that is vitamin K or phylloquinone. Now this one, phyllo word again comes for the leaf, so it is present in all green leafy vegetables, and it is also made by our colon bacteria where it is called naphthoquinone. So it's a slight difference in the structure, but otherwise it has the same function. And it is very important in blood clotting, because in the presence of vitamin K, then only prothrombin and number of other clotting factors can be synthesized by our liver. And if there is deficiency, there would be delayed blood clotting. That means there is some defect in the whole process of blood clotting. And now let us take a question here. Pernicious anemia is caused by the deficiency of. Now just now we have mentioned that deficiency of B1 causes beriberi, deficiency of C causes scurvy, deficiency of D causes rickets and osteomalacia, and it is vitamin B12, the deficiency causes pernicious anemia. So here our answer is option 2. Now one more question. Now which group of the three of the following 5 statements contain having all 3 correct statements regarding beriberi? Now beriberi is deficiency of vitamin B1. So A says a crippling disease prevalent among the native population of sub-Sahara Africa. This one is basically the disease common in this area is kwashiorkor. A deficiency disease caused by the lack of thiamine, that is vitamin B1. Now this statement certainly is correct. C, a nutritional disorder in infants and young children when the diet is persistently deficient in essential protein, that is kwashiorkor, not the B1 deficiency. D, occurs in those countries where the staple diet is polished rice. That's correct, because when the rice is polished, that is the white rice that we eat, the entire upper layer is lost, and along with that layer B1 is also lost. The symptoms are pain from neuritis, paralysis, muscle wasting, progressive edema, mental deterioration, and finally heart failure. So this is also correct. So here we have B, D and E as the correct statements which are mentioned in the option 4. So here our correct answer is option 4. So this brings us to the end of this chapter. In this chapter, we have discussed the entire digestive system and some of the disorders related with it. I hope you have found all the information given to you useful. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful day.